Welcome to Toot Your Own Horn, Music Matters. I am here with the one and only Gail Levinsky. I am so happy you are here, Gail.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. It's a pleasure to see you and talk with you.
I don't know how many decades we go back, but we share Northwestern in common. And Dr. Fred Hemke, who controlled my fate as a clarinetist in more ways than one, is the department chair. And I just am so excited for you to tell our audience your story about how you chose the saxophone and where it's taken you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I think the saxophone chose me. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you. I started on violin in the third grade, and I had a very old school teacher. And in my mind, I'm sure it was much less aggressive than this, but I was in violin class one day in, elementary school, and a classmate of mine did something wrong, and he tapped this friend of mine on the head and said, "This is wrong." In my mind, it was much more than a tap, but years later, maybe it was just a tap. But as that, it's like, I'm not going there. So I am going to switch instruments. And I took off a year, I believe, or the next year. There was a change of teacher. And so it must have been fourth grade. And I switched to clarinet. And this teacher was fantastic. And in fact, my brother was also a clarinetist and 3 years older and really wonderful. And we would share clarinets. I would have clarinet lessons in the morning, and then my teacher would bring the clarinet to my brother at the middle school and later the high school. And so we played that for a couple of years. And then when I was in middle school, which was six, seven, eight, I was pretty good, and I never knew what clarinet I was going to play on a particular piece. I'd walk in, he goes, "You're playing principal B flat," and then he goes, "Well, I need an E flat on this part, so you're playing E flat," and they go, "I need more bass, so you're going to be playing bass." And then in seventh grade, he said, "I need a second alto covered in stage band," which was everybody but the kitchen sink, "and you're going to play alto clarinet on in stage band." Well, that took me 15 seconds to figure out this ain't gonna work. And I said, I think I need a saxophone. So I convinced my parents to rent a saxophone for me. And I had a really close friend who was principal alto. Now, by this time, I'm now in eighth grade, and I just loved it. And I turned to her, and I can still see this conversation in my eyes, and said, "I give you 1 year." And then we went to high school, and I made district. She did not. I was in the concert band, with the ninth graders and stuff. But yeah, and so I think it was meant to be.
Huh?
And I did both for a long time. As you might remember, when I came to Northwestern, I was doing doing a lot of bit of both, actually.
Right, right, right,
And
right.
so now I every once in a while I pull out the clarinet, but really I just do saxophone now.
It seems like it was all sort of self-driven. Like, was there somebody early on that encouraged you, or I mean, did it just feel right away like you knew you wanted to play a musical
Well,
instrument?
my brother was a huge influence. He very, very talented. And he kind of gets upset with me when I say he's the natural musician. He walked in off the street after like 6 months of jazz piano and got accepted to Berkeley. I mean, and wanted to do that. Wanted to perform so badly and be a jazz pianist. My parents like no. Yeah, you've always said you wanted to be a lawyer, so you're going to go that path, and then you go get that degree, and then if you want to do something else, you can do something else. But so he brought a saxophone home. When he was in high school, he was playing tenor in their jazz ensemble, and I opened that case up, and I was like, "Whoa, that's." And I got sort of away with it, if you will, pursuing music because I always said I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was in sixth grade. That's all I wanted to do. So my in that generation, my parents thought She wants to be a teacher. That's awesome. She wants to, teach me. Okay, fine. So that's what I ended up doing.
Oh my gosh. So at what point did you say I'm going to college for this? And was that just a given? Like by the
That
time
was
you're
a
in eighth
given.
grade, you were just for sure you were doing it.
At the end of my sophomore year in high school, my family moved to Indianapolis, and I went to a very, very large high school. My school in Massachusetts, I think my graduation class was maybe 150, and my school in Indianapolis, which was the largest in the state, the three grades, the whole school was over 4,000, and my graduating class was like 1,407, right? So I was in this little conservatory with two bands, two orchestras. Our orchestra teacher was the concertmaster for Henry Mancini during the summer. I mean, we had doctor. I mean, it was just really quite amazing experience. And I had 2 full years of theory and music history before I even went. So, being in Indiana, there was only one place you were going to go, right? And so it was like I applied to Indiana to study with Dr. Rousseau. That's what I wanted to do. And at the car is packed, Lisa. The 11th hour, I think it's like 10 minutes before midnight. Rhetorically, I can't do it. It's too big of a school, and I can't go. I can't do it. And so my father is like, the car is packed. I'm sorry. And I just knew myself, right? So, and I have to say, I called Dr. Rousseau, and that year he had only accepted one first year student, and I was not it. But he said, "You can study with my doctoral student. We want you to come." Right. And so then I had to call him and say, and he was the most gracious, amazing man. I was never took a lesson from him, and yet I just thought the world of him. And side note, years later at Midwest, I saw him in the elevator for the first time since I made that telephone call. And it was like, Dr. Rousseau, I'm sure you don't remember me, but he goes, "Hi, Gail." He was that kind of person, right? So that was lovely. And so anyway, the car is packed. I'm not going to IU. And I just drove myself down. It's like August 27th. I drove myself down to Butler, and I thought that was a better fit, and was accepted and all that. So that's how I ended up at Butler.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then the transition from Butler to Northwestern.
I taught 8 years in Texas. Texas has just an amazing private lesson program. So I had graduated, knew I didn't want to primarily be a band director, that saxophone was my course. So my parents had moved down to Dallas. And I thought, if I could get, I'll work something else, but if I could get a little studio started, that'd be cool. And so in the first semester, I had 9 students, and 3.5 years later, I had 107. And so I did that 12 hours a day, except for Friday, and had a really lovely, lovely clarinet saxophone studio, in primarily in Garland, Texas, which was a wonderful area. And until I woke up one morning and said, "I can't do this anymore." And that was July. So this is what everybody does, right? I took what I call a sabbatical from life. And at that point, I think they're still in business. Brooke Mays Music Company was in Dallas, and a friend of mine at the time had just returned from doing his master's at Northwestern, Scott Pluggy, and he was telling me all about it. So I took this sabbatical from life, and the whole purpose was to get ready to audition for Northwestern, and it was literally Northwestern, or I was going to go back to private teaching. Back to Butler, actually, because there was the saxophone teacher there was from Northwestern. So I actually played principal clarinet in the wind ensemble and practiced 5 hours a day on saxophone, and took a couple classes just because it'd been, 7 years or so, and auditioned for Northwestern. And as they say, the rest is history.
And, Dr. Hemke was absolutely an amazing person. And I only knew him from the perspective of being the chair of the music department.
Hmm.
Pushed his buttons, actually, because
We
um,
all.
I had been a student of Clark Brody's before I came to school, and I studied with Clark my freshman year. And then the second year, I won the pool audition, and Mr. Marcellus did not accept me into his studio, despite that being the rule. I was told I had to do it again. And so I went to Dr. Hemke and said, Clark Brody has been magnificent. Russ Dagan, I have studied with in prior summers, being a high school student and going to Interlochen. He's also magnificent, but I need something different because I feel like I'm at a different level. And I asked to study with Dick Olberg, the third horn of the CSO. And
Oh,
Fred
good for you.
Hemke's eyes rolled. He was like, he doesn't play the clarinet. And I'm like, I know he doesn't. And
Yes.
I had to go outside the box and Fred had to deal with that with me.
Yes, but we remember that magnificent class that we had, performance practice and criticism.
Yeah,
Remember that? Well,
yeah,
wasn't that the basis of that experience, is that you were learning from these magnificent musicians, I was fortunate to, in my doctorate, to oversee that class. I mean, I learned more in that class pedagogically than bless his memory, than I did from Dr. Hemke, because that different perspective and how to teach, everybody has their shtick and their information, and I am so grateful for that experience.
yeah, for sure. And so what happened after you tell us the transition from Northwestern on? What happened after that?
So I did my master's and my what we called an graduate certificate of performance, kind of a artist diploma, second year master's at that time. And then I thought, okay, well, that was 2 years of school. It's been too long. I need to go back. And so I took a sort of a year off, and I taught in Plano and a little bit. It wasn't the motivation per se, but I just needed some downtime. I had applied for the doctorate and was accepted, but I wanted to take a year off before I came back and started. So, I did that and I came back for the doctorate. I was committed. I'm sure we both know lots of students who were on the 12-year plan. Higher ed, especially in the arts, was in a transition point that a master's was not quite enough. There was lots of people who had masters, and now we were upping the requirements a little bit. And so I was applying for jobs and not getting. So I knew the doctorate needed to happen. I took that year off, started getting positions, and I had applied for a woodwinds position at Mississippi State, and they did not have enough applicants or something. They put the search on hold for a year, and so I kept on doing my thing, and I got the call to come down a year later, come down for the interview. And so there is like, I'm not sure. It was, a lovely campus. That was not in my vision to be in Mississippi for a lot of different reasons. And, you talk about pushing Fred's buttons. He was like, Gail, I got the call. I got the call. I think this is it. I think it's like, this person is not running to Mississippi. And he wouldn't talk to me for a weekend.
That sounds
And
about right.
right, right. And so I kind of came to my senses. And that Monday, it's like I went into the office. It's like, okay. I mean, and then I got this humongous, bear hug. You can't, your first position, you have to do. And having said that, my closest friends, came from there. I still perform with my collaborative pianist, who a year ago retired from there, and I just came back from visiting her and her family. And I'm still very connected to my students who were from there. And so it was a glorious 6 years, I believe, down there.
Wow.
And, there's still parts of it that I miss terribly, but I've had an incredible 25-year run at Susquehanna, which I applied for not because I was not happy at Mississippi State, but my parents were getting older. I grew up in, Massachusetts, and I wanted to get closer to them. And, I've been there now, like I said, 25 years.
Mm. And tell us a little bit about this camp that you work with.
The youth camp is called New England Music Camp,
New England Music.
and it's a family-owned establishment that's been in business for 87 years, 88 years, I think, this summer. And the umbrella organization is called Snow Pond Center for the Arts.
Yeah.
And from there, I also am program director and artistic director for the Snow Pond Music Festival, which includes the Frederick L. Hemke Saxophone Institute. So I kind of wear a couple different hats within the organization. Yeah, I've been doing that for quite a while now.
Oh, that's awesome. If somebody was listening to this podcast and just really amazed by your story, and what would you say to them to get them to try to play a wind instrument right now?
Complete joy. It's just joy. Even when it's not a joyful day, it doesn't sound very good. You can't find the reed. You can't, the embouchure's not happy. It's cold outside. At the end of it, it doesn't take much to find the complete joy. I just go for it. Absolutely. I think part of what we are always in search for are new things. So this is the time, when you have that freedom, whether it's an adult or, a child, there's nothing better.